You're watching HCAM TV.
And welcome to HKM TV, and welcome to the Hangout Hour, our live discussion show from 2 to 3 o'clock every weekday, as well as a growing number of other times with live programming. So this show, we're going to first have a local author on for the first half hour, and then for the second half hour, we'll be talking with members of the Open Space Committee. And with me as co-host for this first half hour, he's almost doing enough to be called a regular. He's just a couple more, and it's to be a regular. It's John Ritz. John, welcome to our show again.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Glad very much that you can join us. And also welcome to our special guest, Alison Leary. Oh, you're muted.
So,
it's okay. Everybody does that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Nice to be on with you.
It's so exciting to have you here, and I appreciate that you're taking the time to be here. Now, I know we actually got connected because you're doing something with the Hopkinton Library,
yes,
and you're an author. And
yes,
the first thing I'd like to do, it's just so great. I'd love to hear your story, love to hear where you came from, like where you grew up, and what you're doing now.
Okay. My name is Alison O Leary, and that name may be familiar to folks in Hopkinton because I grew up in Hopkinton, in the backyard of Weston Nurseries, and my parents continue to live there. Same house, 60 plus years later. I was one of the younger ones, of course, so 60 is well before my time. But wonderful place to grow up. I still have a lot of connections in Hopkinton, still spend a lot of time there. And fortunately, my kids feel very grounded in Hopkinton, thanks to my parents. And I was a journalist for many years. I wrote for newspapers across the country. And when we settled back in Massachusetts in, let me just think, 25 years ago, I started to write for local newspapers. I started doing a group of weeklies based in Needham, and eventually moved over to Boston Globe West. I did some Hopkinton reporting as a Boston Globe reporter, really enjoyed that. Eventually finished my college degree in my 30s and became a magazine editor. Unfortunately, 10 years ago, when we hit the last big financial bump in the road, the rug got pulled out from under me, and suddenly I got my pink slip and I was on my own to figure things out. So
No kidding. Wow. That's a great story.
It's been an interesting trip, but it's not over yet. I partnered with a very well-known author from the area, both professionally and personally partnering with him. His name is Michael Togus. He's published at least 30 books now, including The Finest Hours, which was a Disney movie back in 2016. And Mike and I have published 3 books together. I'm working on my 4th as we speak. And I also, in the meantime, became a public speaker. And I take these stories with me to public libraries, historical societies, rest homes, retirement homes, and sort of act as an entertainer and educator about the outdoors and historical topics.
Wow, that's really great. So 3 books so far.
Yeah.
Can you give us the titles of them?
Sure. Let me show you a picture. I have a little, can I show you my little slideshow?
Absolutely. Share your screen. That'll be great.
Okay. All right. Let's see. It'll take me 2 seconds to figure this out, how to share my screen.
Okay. It is a learning curve, I know.
Here it is. My goodness, there's so much going on my screen. Okay, can we see
Here it comes.
that?
Okay.
All right, so here are my 3 books. So Close to Home is a true story of World War II. That's the one on the left with the blue cover. It's a story of an American family that was aboard a freighter ship in 1942, and the ship was torpedoed by a German submarine in the Gulf of Mexico. Fascinating period of history that unfortunately a lot of Americans are completely unaware of because we did not learn about this in school. And I did speak at Hopkinton Public Library. Actually, the library was under renovation at the time, so I spoke up at the art center near the high school
Yes.
on that a few years ago when the book first came out. Again, great story, and I'm working on a follow-up to that. The middle book is called Inns and Adventures, and it is a history and explorer's guide to Vermont, New Hampshire, and the Berkshires. It's kind of a fun romp through New England, opportunities, places to go and hike or kayak. Great little insight into local inns that you can visit and stay at up there. And a lot of fun historical tidbits and humorous stories. So the book furthest to the right on the screen is the Appalachian Mountain Club's Best Day Hikes Near Boston, which is the topic of my May 19th Hikes Through History program with Hopkinton Public Library. The Best Day Hikes book is an Appalachian Mountain Club guidebook that covers 60 different opportunities to hike and be outdoors in eastern Massachusetts. Anywhere between Cape Ann, way up on the North Shore, and Chatham on Cape Cod, the national seashore. We've got it covered with insight into the sort of wildlife you can find on these different hikes, whether it's a scenic view sort of a hike or a well-shaded hike through the woods, you get to pick. Many of them are accessible by public transportation. Some are suitable for mobility impaired folks. And my program, which I will probably broadcast on HCAM through the library on May 19th, covers a smattering of them, certainly not all 60 hikes, but a variety, a nice selection of them with different opportunities, and gives the historical insight into those properties.
So, quick question for you, Allison.
Yes.
The two books on the right, is any one of those pictures of you?
The one in the middle is me on a bicycle.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh, that's now the first book, as they say on Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the others. The
Yeah.
first book, which sounds very interesting as well, is clearly a very different topic.
Right.
Now, are the two on the right that you're interested in? How did you find the story for the first book?
The World War II book.
Yeah.
Well, that in itself is fascinating. As I've told you, I'll show you a picture of my partner in crime, Mike. As I said, he's a well-known author. Oh my goodness, my picture's coming up.
Okay.
Mike is a well-known author. He speaks at many, many libraries, historical societies. He speaks to business groups.
Yep.
Let me see. Here we are.
Okay.
Here we are at the Finest Hours movie premiere in Boston. He has
Cool.
written, I think, 6 or 7 true rescue at sea books. And he's very well known among the U.S. Coast Guard for highlighting what they do, what they've done throughout history. The Finest Hours was based in 1952 off of Cape Cod. So he is often called upon when people have a great Coast Guard story that they want to tell. And unfortunately, a lot of the stories, while they may be exciting and very interesting, they don't sustain an entire book-length project.
Mhm.
So he's very used to being approached by folks who say, "Oh, Mike, you got to write about this, and Mike, you got to write about that," and oftentimes has to turn them down. Well, a friend of his, a fishing buddy, approached him once and said, "Hey, Mike, I met this guy who has a very interesting rescue at sea story." And of course, Mike said, "Yeah, but I don't think I'm interested." And the guy said, no, really, this happened during World War II. I think you'll be interested. So we looked into it, and it turns out that this guy was 8 years old with his family on a freighter ship coming up through the Gulf of Mexico, and German submarines were in the Gulf of Mexico picking off ships one at a time. I mean, the German submarines sunk on average one ship a day in
Wow.
US waters month after month after month of 1942. It was just an incredible slaughter of merchant mariners right on our shores. So when we started to realize that this was an aspect of American history that we were unfamiliar with, both of us said, boy, this would probably make a really good book. And it does. It's a great book. You know, it's not just the family story, but it's a story about the sailors who manned those German submarines and how they would stay at sea for 3 months at a time. 50 men crammed into this tin can under the water, smelly, unshowered, unshaven. Just a fascinating aspect of history.
Wow. Now, just jumping around a little bit, Inns and Adventures. How did you land upon that?
That was actually our first book
Oh, okay.
because now, unfortunately, I can't see my slides very well, but I'll show you. Okay. So both of us are outdoors people.
Mhm.
And this is a picture of me doing a recent climb in the mountains in Vermont. Mike had actually published many outdoors books. Um, one of his most popular ones is called There's a Porcupine in My Outhouse, because he has a cabin up in Vermont and he's had many adventures there since he was in his 20s. Um, so he and I discussed, my best opportunities for breaking into publishing without undertaking a huge project, and my best opportunity for creating these programs that I could speak about at libraries. And Inns and Adventures turned out to be the one. So I do a slideshow. I talk about places that he and I both have traveled to, either together or individually, in New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Berkshires, adventures we've had up there, good, bad, and otherwise. No, that isn't Vermont. Let's see. Here we are. I was on the Connecticut Lakes, way up in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. And so we put together this book of, as I said, his adventures, my adventures, and the ones we've had together.
Yep.
And I take this slideshow to libraries sort of to entertain folks
Ooh.
and to enlighten them to the opportunities that are out there in our beautiful part of the world.
Right. Now, what do you look for in an inn, and what do you look for in an adventure?
Oh, very good question. Very good question. I love the small local inns that are family run or locally owned, not unfortunately the red roof inns of the world.
Yep.
We see plenty of those, but as nice as they can be, I prefer to visit those which I can support, families who own them, that sort of thing. And so uh, we do what we can to visit, those out
Yeah.
of the way places with a little bit of history.
Yep.
And it's inevitable that the innkeepers know their local area, or they've traveled throughout New England, and they have lots of fascinating information for you if you just take the time to have a conversation. It's usually over breakfast. They give you some tips. Try this trail, try fishing here or there, and you'll have good luck. Um,
Yeah.
so that's the sort of inn I look for. As far as adventures go, Mike and I often diverge. I am a mountain biker and I love to do long mountain hikes. He prefers fishing and water-based activities. Of course, we trade back and forth. We do things together, we do things separately. So the book is a nice combination of both.
Yep. That's really cool. And when you're just describing an adventure, do you give like details, where to go, where to get a kayak or a mountain bike, and
Yes.
trails you recommend and why?
Yep, throughout the book, there are tips about how to execute, what we have done, places that we've been, and how to get in touch with the inn that is described.
Yep. That's cool. Just as an aside, my family went to Yellowstone a couple years ago, and my wife got this app which would know where you were by geolocation. And
Yep.
so as we were coming to things, this narrator would come on and say, "Oh, turn left up here, and you'll find this cool thing," or "There's a history of something over there." And when you have somebody along with you, whether through an app or whether through a book, there's just something really cool about discovering facts and information that you wouldn't know otherwise.
Yes, yes. Guidebooks are really helpful when they're done well.
Yeah.
And I always attach a disclaimer to our Inns and Adventures book because it's not so much a straight up guidebook as something that you can glean some tips from. You can try to retrace the things that we've done, but it's more inspirational, aspirational, so that folks can use it as a jumping off point. Oh, look, here's a great inn to stay at, and look, they went here as well. So, you know, it's something that they can do if they so choose.
Right. All right, John, I know you want to say something.
I was going to say there are a million guidebooks out there, and I was going to ask how yours are different, but I think you've just answered that. Your approach. How long does it take you to start to finish to write a book?
That varies a lot on the book itself. The Inns and Adventures book, Mike had been a syndicated newspaper columnist and outdoor columnist, and so he had a lot of material. When I got laid off from my job as a magazine editor, I knew nothing of what to do with myself except to go outside. And so I started to write a blog. And when we decided to put this book together, we used pieces of my blog, pieces of information that he had accumulated over the years, and adventures that we had had together, and patched it all together. So that book came together fairly easily. The Appalachian Mountain Club book, Best Day Hikes Near Boston, was something that was assigned to me, and it ran on the Appalachian Mountain Club's schedule. So when their editor was assigned to work on certain parts of it, that's when deadlines came into play, and it ran on their schedule. The So Close to Home World War II book we accomplished very, very quickly. In the publishing world, oftentimes a book project can take 3 to 5 years. But we put this together in probably 2 years, start to finish.
Wow.
And yeah, it was incredibly quick.
And how, is this just you putting yourself up at an inn and going in and reviewing it? Is there any kind of, I don't know, is there any kind of the publisher sending you to places, or how do you make your choices?
No, as I said, some of this is material that he had previously. So if you were to read the book, sometimes he's at an inn with his kids who are now grown up. So this is material, from the past, his visit in the past with his children. Likewise, with some of the information that I provided, it came from different points in time. So I think that kind of book that you're talking about, which is, say, the guidebook to New England, those don't happen very much anymore. They're tough sellers. So there aren't publishers really setting up writers unless it's like a Foder's Guide, that, worldwide recognition of that guidebook company.
Yeah.
There are very few small guidebooks these days.
Do you expect to stay in the New England area, or do you think you may do other areas of the country as well?
I have lived in many other areas of the country. At a different point in my life, I was fortunate to sample them without having to commit. I spent a lot of time on the West Coast. I spent a couple of years in Texas and Alabama. I lived in Maine. I lived in Nevada. And I'm very happy to be back in New England.
Is New England your favorite place
We
to
have
be?
it all here.
Yeah.
We have it all here. And as nice as the mountains are out west, which I really enjoyed, and the skiing, I lived an hour from Lake Tahoe. That's nice, but who wants to drive 2 hours to go grocery shopping because things are so spread out? It's the geography is so different, it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
So
My wife has a friend who lives in Texas, and she thinks nothing about driving 4 hours to go visit somebody. It's a different scale.
exactly. For us, when I lived there, I lived in the dead center of the state, and it was 10 hours to get out of the state of Texas.
Wow.
So to drive to El Paso, if we were going to California, 10 hours, and you're thinking, I could be, in Washington, D.C. from Boston by now, easily.
Yeah.
But things are very different in the West and down south, especially.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes in the winter, I think, oh, yeah, if I was living more down south, but then I hear about the bugs and the poisonous snakes, and I'm like, you know what? I like it up here.
right.
John.
So, is the pandemic putting a crimp on your research for your next book? I mean, nobody's going hiking in the White Mountains anymore, at least out of Massachusetts. We're all
Right.
stuck.
Yeah, I understand that not only are a lot of the trailheads closed, you cannot park up there. New Hampshire, like many other states, wants people who are arriving to quarantine for 2 weeks, which is not really something you can do if you just want to go climb for a couple of days. So, respecting that, staying out of New Hampshire for now. The Appalachian Mountain Club, unfortunately, has decided to close all of the high mountain huts for the entire summer,
Wow.
which is such a blow. Yeah, that's incredible. So there isn't going to be any water source if you're hiking later in the summer.
Wow.
Unless you have a life straw and you want to drink out of a stream or something, or you're pretty up on preventing giardia. What can you do? So it's not really crimping my next book, because my next book will go back to World War II history. I can do a lot of that online. I was at the British National Archives in London back in December, thank goodness, before all of this hit the fan, and did a lot of research then, collected a lot of material that I am working on right now. I have a huge pile of papers over on the table next to me that I have to cull through, personal experiences through World War II. So that's my project. And I am very fortunate. I live in Plymouth now. I live within a couple of miles of Miles Standish State Forest, and I can ride my bike over there and do off-roading for hours and hours a day and never run into another person. So face mask optional.
If you need more World War II stuff, I've got 70 pages of my father's recollections from his time in the Pacific. So,
Oh, cool. Well, I'm a Battle of the Atlantic historian at this point,
okay.
but who knows? I could go there at some point.
My brother-in-law is an author. He's done a lot. He did a whole bunch on the Merchant Marines in World War II. So,
Yeah, yeah.
cool. Good
That's neat.
stories.
Yeah.
So they're
Absolutely.
vastly different, Allison. Your World War stories and your ins and stuff.
The benefit of a good education. You can switch gears as necessary. I actually, because I'm no longer employed by a newspaper or a magazine, I have had to really work on my roots as a journalist. I do a lot of web copy now. I write for a company that has websites, and they send me all the craziest assignments, and I just have to do what research I can and, bang out 1,000 words here or there on whatever topic they give me. So I'm constantly shifting gears, and it's second nature to go from an outdoors topic to a historical topic to, for instance, a crime topic for this website.
Right. And when you're writing about an historical event from World War II and you're doing your research and you're reading the accounts that people have given and the reporting that has gone on then, how do you translate that into your book? I always hear about when they make movies, they make up characters that are composites of other characters and things like that. How do you think about that while you're writing a story like that?
Well, again, fortunately, because I am very deeply rooted in journalism, when I read a nonfiction book, it's a nonfiction book. I don't make
Aha.
anything up. I don't make anything up. So the material I was able to get from the National Archives in England, just incredibly rich personal accounts of what happened to these people. I don't want to give away too much,
Yep.
but let's just say it's another ship that got torpedoed. Many of them spent weeks in lifeboats, weeks.
Oh man.
And a few of them survived to write their own accounts of what that was like. And so I don't have to make anything up. I don't think I could imagine personally what they went through. So thank goodness they did leave their own accounts. They filed them oftentimes with different government agencies that were investigating the shipwreck and hopefully how it could have been prevented. I don't know if they ever got that far. But there are ample stories out there that nothing needs to be imagined. It's all real.
Yeah. And how did your partner, I'm sure you've talked about it, when they translated Finest Hours into a movie, were there a lot of dealing with that? Did the movie producers or the script writer say we need to composite people, or how did
No,
that work?
actually, they did a very, very nice job on the movie The Finest Hours. And I was there for the day by day thoughts about what was going into it with Mike. It was a really interesting process. Disney did a wonderful job. They stuck to the facts. They stuck to the characters that truly existed that people could identify with. I was fortunate to meet a couple of the people who were in the book and whose characters were portrayed in the movie. The one thing that they did a little different was that they played up the female role because the book was very, very strictly about this Coast Guard crew that went out to rescue people off of a 450-foot long tanker that had split in half in a storm. That's something you can't really make up, or you don't need to make it up. It really happened.
Right.
Because the book is about that crew, Disney wanted more of a romantic angle, so they played up the wife of the hero, Bernie Weber. And we thought that the woman who played the role was very, very good, that it was a believable character, and yet she existed, but she didn't exist in those actions that were portrayed in the movie. So they took a little bit of creative license with it, but we found it very acceptable.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Well, this half hour has kind of flown by. Allison, I want to thank you so much for spending your time with us and for sharing your thoughts about your writing. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that we see you soon in your collaboration with the Hopkinton Library.
It should be May 19th. We're still working on it, but Hikes Through History here on HCAM May 19th with Hopkinton Public Library. I'd appreciate you letting anybody know.
We will definitely promote it throughout the whole multimedia empire.
Wonderful. Thank you
Thank you.
very
You
much.
have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too.
All right, John, thanks for joining me. John, the next half hour is Open Space Committee. So you're a big open space guy. If you have time to hang around, you're welcome to hang around. If you got to go, we understand that too. So before we turn, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to give us a quick update of some of the upcoming shows that you will be seeing here pretty soon. Take it away, Matt.
Thanks, Jim. Well, coming up tomorrow, we have where is it? Oh yeah, we have we're going to be catching up with Margie Wiggin, and then we're going to have Chuck Joseph, who's going to be talking some history of the town, which is always fascinating stuff. And then, of course, tomorrow night at 7 p.m., we have Cheryl Peralt back on. She's going to be having a few artists on the show. And then on Sunday, we have the combined Christian service on at 10:30 in the morning.
That's great. Thank you, Matt. That's like 10 hours of live programming this week alone.
It's pretty great.
It's really great. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
And right now, I am welcoming into our online meeting TV show the guests for our next half hour. We're talking about open space. And as soon as they arrive, oh, here we go. Okay, good, good. Where's Ed? Oh, Ed is connecting to audio. Okay. Maury, welcome.
Hi.
Could you please, and Krista, just introduce yourselves for anybody who might not know you?
Okay. I'm Maury Gasser. I'm president of the Hopkinton Area Land Trust. And I'm here to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Wonderful. Krista? Oh, you're muted.
I'm Krista Collins. I'm the Director of Land Protection for Sudbury Valley Trustees. And for anyone who's not familiar with SVT, we are a member-supported nonprofit regional land trust, and we work in 36 communities between Boston and Worcester, including Hopkinton.
That's great. And I'm sorry, did you give your position there?
Yes, I'm the Director of Land Protection.
Okay. All right. Now, we're going to hope that Ed gets connected soon. It looks like he's still working on getting in there.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, Ed, we can hear you just fine.
But I can't make the camera seemingly work.
When you click down below on the camera, do you see, what do you see?
I see start video and it's got a big nasty slash through it. So I clicked on it and nothing happened.
All right, so go to the upper arrow on the right of that.
Yeah.
And on that pop-up under select a camera, do you see any options?
Yeah, the one that usually runs, and then it's got video settings and choose a virtual background.
Okay. And it only has one camera in there.
Yeah.
Okay. What you might want to try, from time to time, this does happen. I would suggest exit the meeting and come back into the meeting and see if that will allow it to work.
Okay, leave meeting. I wouldn't want you to miss my due. Hang on, we'll see what happens.
Okay. While we're waiting for that, Maury,
Yes.
HALT. Tell us about HALT in a brief encapsulation.
Yeah, well, HALT it's a private organization started in 1995, and it's a land trust, just like SVT is a land trust. And our goal is to preserve and protect as much land, open space that we can in Hopkinton. We've got a board of not only 9 directors, although one just moved off to Cape Cod, so we only have 8 right now. And we meet every couple months. We do a lot of work helping to manage the trails in town. I could put up a little map of our properties. Do you want to take a look at it now?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. All right. So are you a private organization or?
We are private. We're not affiliated with any government agency. We're completely volunteer, funded by donations. And although we work a lot with the town, of course, in preserving land.
Okay. And Krista, SVT is also you said a private corporation?
Sure, yeah, and we are, as I said, we're member supported. We have almost 3,000 member households, and that funds the bulk of our activities. We do have staff members, so we have about 12 full-time equivalent staff doing land protection, stewardship of our properties, and then taking care of our members and raising the money that we need to do our work.
And how long has SVT been around?
We were founded in 1953. So about 67 years ago, and in that time, we've protected about 5,300 acres of land. People in Hopkinton might be most familiar with our Saddle Hill Reservation or our newer Whitehall Woods Reservation on Pond Street. So we own 91 reservations and then hold conservation restrictions on another 90 properties throughout our service area.
So I understand the motivation of the Hopkinton Area Land Trust, and I'm interested. How would you describe the motivation of the Sudbury Valley trustees? Because you don't live in all those towns, right?
Right.
And you have like a very large focus, and is it kind of like competitive between the SVT and HALT when it comes to preserving properties in Hopkinton specifically?
We hope not. We really like to do is work in partnership, and with not just with HALT, but with the town of Hopkinton. Our service area is defined by the watershed of the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord River. So that's really, we started in Wayland it was a group of citizens who kind of banded together to oppose the channelization of the Sudbury River, and kind of grew from there. So some of the towns that we work in don't have local land trusts. So we are the de facto local land trust. And in other towns, we're very lucky to have local organizations like HALT, who are really sort of the eyes and ears on the ground. And then sometimes we can come in and assist because we have paid staff. We can sometimes help with fundraising around projects or some of the more technical aspects, and bring grants to the table. So we've partnered really successfully with a lot of the local land trusts in our area over the years, and we're so grateful for their support too.
Okay. All right. So Ed, at this point, if you can't get your video going, but you want to just join the conversation, that's just fine. We'll hear you. And I would say that feel free to jump in if you can't get your camera going. At this point, Maury, can we turn to your map and see what we got in Hopkinton?
Sure. So right at this time, Hopkinton HALT owns or manages a total of about 900 acres of land in town. And let me share my screen. Hold on. Working
900 acres. Krista, how many acres does SVT have? Do you know?
All told, about 4,000, I think, in that's combined properties we own outright and hold conservation restrictions on. I don't have an exact number in my head for what we hold in Hopkinton.
Sure. No, that's fine.
Okay. Let me see. I think
Here we go.
Can you see that?
It's starting, and now we can see it. Yes.
Okay. So this is obviously the town, and I've shown here, highlighted all of the properties in town that HALT has some responsibility for. This would either be a conservation restriction on land that is owned by the town or someone else, or land that we own directly. And you see it kind of spread around town, but what's important about it is not really this map, but if you add in all the other public land in town, which I show in green here, all the public accessible land, that would be some Sudbury Valley trustees land, state park, town land. I think that's it. Some land belongs to Upton. And what I show here in this map are the also the trails.
Mm-hmm.
The trails managed by HALT amount to about anywhere from 15 to 20 miles. It's hard to really count miles of trails, but if you add in all the trails that are run by the state and SVT and so on. You get quite a lot of miles of trails. And it's wherever you live in town, the thing to point out is you're probably close to a trail. You might even be within walking distance of a trail. So if you haven't gone out and looked, you could go to our health website, and we'll tell you about most of these trails.
Okay. So what makes you target specific properties? Is it what is available, or do you kind of look at what the town looks like and target areas?
Well, a lot of these properties kind of fall into our lap because a developer will construct, for example, what's called an open space land protection development, an OSLPD, where they build some houses, and they then have to donate at least 50%. I think that's the number, 50% of the land is open space, and we get land that way. Land that the town purchases or owns, like Center Trail, for example, as you see here. Can you see my cursor moving?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay, so Center Trail, Fruit Street, the Cameron Woods, the town purchased those properties. They gave us the conservation restriction to manage them.
Yeah.
Also, some others.
All right.
So sometimes we go out and actively look for land, but we can't afford to buy land. We never buy land. It has to be donated. The owner can get a tax deduction, sometimes not very big, for doing that. Lots of times we get land that landowners just want to keep open for the public forever. And they do it that way. They want to pass it along as a legacy, kind of.
May I jump in here for a second?
Yeah.
Speaking of what property owners can get, there is one of the things I would like to talk about is House Bill 4465, which anyone who is interested should write or call Representative Dykema or Senator Karen Spilka. It provides a $75,000 tax credit to those who, in essence, preserve land in a natural state. It's involved. And part of what this bill does is increase the fund available on a year basis to $5 million. So it has the potential of having a significant increase in people that benefit nature and the environment by doing something useful with their land. Speaking for myself and my mother had land in Chapter 61 in Norwell, and we were able to take advantage of some of this program by working out a deal with the town. So it's a useful, valuable tool.
Yeah.
To give people an incentive and to put money in their pocket for doing the right thing.
Right.
And it might be worth mentioning, is that you said $75,000? Is that in addition to any other tax break?
I believe so, but I can't answer that question.
Okay.
And if the party doesn't have taxes due the town, due the state, this money can accrue to them directly. In other words, not a rebate on their taxes, but the state writes a check.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty useful thing.
Krista, what does SVT look for when they're trying to acquire land?
Well, we have actually done a prioritization exercise for our whole service area, and there's a lot of great data out there. A lot of it's available through the state, through Mass GIS. And we look for things like priority habitat, where there might be rare or endangered species. We look for connectivity in open space, and that's, Maury noted how many big blocks of conservation land there are here, and that's really important. It's always been important for maintaining species diversity, but it's even more important now as our climate is changing. Species that can move are going to start moving north, and we need to be able to provide corridors to allow that movement. So those are a couple of the ways that we identify and prioritize different properties for protection. And one way that our three, that HALT and SVT and the town were going to be collaborating was by holding a workshop for landowners of priority lands. And that was supposed to happen in early April. And we were going to talk about things like this great tax credit and other incentives for protecting private land. And unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 crisis, we had to postpone that. But we did reach out to a lot of landowners, provided them some links to information in case they're interested in conservation. And when the coast is clear, we do hope to reach that event because it can be very complicated. It's a big decision for families, for landowners to make. A lot of times, land is a family's greatest asset, and these decisions are hard and they take a long time. So we try to provide as much information as we can so people can make an informed decision.
Right. Okay. All right. So Maury, if we could just stop sharing your screen so we can see
Stop sharing.
your faces as you're talking.
It's a nice screen.
I know it is. I know, Ed. It's a very nice.
I see
screen.
a little button up there.
All right.
That work?
So yes. So one quick question I have. Okay, I see you, John. One quick question I have, Krista, is you mentioned this. You talk about it's the watershed area of the river. Whenever I hear that, the first thing I think about is protecting the water supply. Is that part of your focus, or is it something different?
It increasingly it is. I mean, it's hard to make an argument for protecting land sometimes when it only has, or it's perceived as only having one asset. If you say, well, there's an important salamander there, that's not going to resound with everybody. But if you say it's got an important salamander and it's going to have trails on part of it, and it's protecting our local water supply, and the trees are helping to clear the air that you breathe, then all of a sudden you're making a case for all of those values that nature provides. So protect as climate change becomes more intense, we're going to experience more drought, and protecting those water supply areas is going to be more and more important, both groundwater and surface water.
Okay, John.
So I'm with the Hopkinton Trails Club. All of you, your primary focus is preserving the land itself. How important is it to put trails on this land once you get it, and how do you work with town coordinating committees and that sort of thing?
I could answer that. Trails are extremely important. Our interest in preserving land is often based on whether we can build a trail on there, whether there's connectivity from that piece of property to another piece of property that has trails. Trails are what get people out there walking the land. I mean, you can't, dense forests and thickets and swamps aren't going to interest a lot of people. They are important to preserve those too, but people need to get out there, and that's how we get public support for preserving more land like that. So that's extremely important. And we're constantly working on trail construction, trail maintenance. We've got a new boardwalk we're working on at Pelican Woods. If you go to our website and you look up Pelican Woods, you'll see a trail there. You can't get around it now because there's a lot of wetness there, but we're working on a boardwalk to make it passable.
And I'm wondering, Ed, jump in.
Yeah. With respect to trails, they're not just for people that walk. They're for people that run. They're for people that bike. They're for people that ride horses. There's a lot of potential for trails. And the more that we can encourage people, which we don't have to right now. I live adjacent to Lake Whitehall, and we can look out our back window, and it's almost like a traffic jam now. The quantity of people out taking a meditative, sort of quiet, exploratory walk in the woods is just fabulous. Signing off.
Good. Yeah, that's good. Now, I'm curious. My son is a member of the Audubon Society, so he's always dragging us out to, Eagle Fast and all these things like that. And I just feel that I'm just curious how interest in that type of nature, in the wildlife, in the bird populations, do you have groups of your members that also have a passion for that? Do you have any type of programming that tries to accentuate those values in the properties that you control?
SVT does a lot of programming. If people go to our website, which is svtweb.org, the calendar of events, which admittedly is a little thin right now because we had to cancel all our spring programming because of the crisis. But where we've been able to, we've taken those programs online. So a lot of our speakers agreed to do Zoom presentations instead of live presentations. So we're trying to keep that going, and we have other ways for people to engage on there too. There's a series of activities that we put up for Earth Day to help people learn the bird songs, because all the migratory birds are starting to come through right now. We have some plant identification tools. So, like Ed said, people have just been flocking to conservation lands now, which is amazing. And I think it's making them more curious about what they're seeing and hearing out there. So if we can provide some of those tools to help people identify what they're hearing and seeing, we try to do that on our website through our programs.
Okay, Maury, Ed?
Yeah, I just want to congratulate SVT. I have, in the past 6 months, been physically to 2 conferences and taken 2 online classes. Specifically, those 2 were on invasives and control of invasives, and I have found them incredibly helpful.
Thanks, Ed.
You're welcome. You can pay me later.
All right. So Maury has said that HALT does not purchase land because land is really expensive. The SVT buy land?
We do sometimes, usually because we're in such a high value real estate market around here, we rarely do it by ourselves. It's usually in partnership. We're so fortunate that so many communities in our service area have adopted the Community Preservation Act, because it's been a really steady source of funding for open space acquisition. Not every landowner can afford to give away land. Most can't. So where we can, supplement town funds with private fundraising or private foundation grants, we try to do that. And then the state offers some very generous and competitive grant programs too. So it's usually a cobbling together of a lot of resources.
And further to my previous comment on invasives, the town is also, through the efforts of Ben Sweeney, who's our grant person, suckered a grant out of Sudbury Valley trustees for invasive removal work. So they are a source of funding through themselves.
I think that's through the Cooperative Invasive Species Management.
Right, yeah, CISMA.
Yeah.
So people who are watching this and are discovering you, both HALT and SVT, I understand now your focus and your purpose. What would you say? What would be your elevator pitch? What would be if you came across somebody and they said, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Why should I join that?" What's other than preserving the land? Because I would imagine grant writing is not a really fun activity unless you're really made for that. But why do we join you?
Yes. We spent a lot of time on things we just have to do. For example, every piece of land that you saw on those maps requires somebody to go out once or twice a year and make sure that the land is intact. They have to go around the entire boundary, which means we have to mark the boundary, and we want to make sure that there's no encroachment from the neighbors or anywhere else. And that's challenging to do because there's a lot of neighbors around these properties. And if we don't keep doing that, then the land is going to shrink, it's going to be damaged and whatever. So joining us will help. We could use volunteers as well to help us do all this monitoring. And there's expenses involved in maintaining this. If we don't get the resources to do that, trees are going to fall across trails, and nobody's going to open them back up, and things like that. So there's a lot of continuous maintenance.
Okay.
Yeah, I echo what Maury says. A lot of the more neighbors you have to conservation land, the more expensive it can be to maintain that conservation land. People are worried about trees falling on their property, and as anyone who's ever had to hire an arborist to take down a tree knows, it's several $1,000s per tree sometimes. So our stewardship activities do require the funds to keep our properties usable and healthy and safe. And a lot of money, the money that we raise also goes directly towards our land protection program. So I think it's people like knowing that they, in their small or large part, help to preserve a piece of land in their community. And whether it's working farmland or forest or wetland, every dollar counts in the work that we do.
That's really great. We're coming to the end of our time. We have a couple of minutes left. Just want to make sure, John, if you have any final questions or thoughts, that you get those in.
No, I'm good. I do want to echo the calls for volunteers. I've been a volunteer with both SVT and HALT at various times over the years, and I urge everybody to step up and help as much as they can.
That's great. And volunteers for organizations like these are the life's blood. I understand that. And I know that there are never enough volunteers. There can always be more. But how are you doing? Do you have, you know what I mean? Are you in a volunteer crisis? Are you having a volunteer drive? How are your organizations doing?
I think we're doing pretty good. Lately, especially, we've had, for example, 3 people come to us in the last several weeks offering to volunteer as trail stewards and property stewards. That's great. We could always use that kind of help. And as these people get more involved with our organization, maybe they'll go further and do other things for us. Even though we're all volunteers, some of these jobs are practically full-time if we let them. And but I think we're doing pretty good as far as volunteers. Mostly it's the funding to do things that we need that we can't really do. That for instance, putting up those beautiful trail signs we have on those trails, they used to be paid for by Community Preservation Committee money, no longer. So they're very expensive. That's the only way people will know about our trails, if we get good signs. That's an example of the costs.
Okay. And Krista, how about your organization?
We have amazing volunteers. As you said, they really are the lifeblood of the organization, and we can always use more. And then there are people, people volunteer in so many different ways, whether it's Eagle Scouts building kiosks and bridges, or just people who, sort of on their own kind of go and pull garlic mustard along their favorite trails. So we can volunteer at all different kinds of levels. We always need more office volunteers. Well, not right now, but in real normal life, stuffing envelopes and things like that. So yeah, we'll always use more, but we love the volunteers that we have.
Okay.
Can I get a few words in here for answer for Maury?
Ed, go ahead.
So Barry Rosenblum went to a lot of effort to put together a fabulous budget, which has been accepted for going to town meeting. And if it gets voted through at town meeting, Open Space will have funds to provide to places like organizations like HALT for signs on their property. It's part of our effort. And another little thing I don't want to let slip by is I love turtles. And I see too many turtles that are crossing the street. Either they're moms or they want to be moms, and they don't make it. And I'm trying to get signs put up at typical turtle crossing places. I'm not really sure how valuable those signs are, but I figure they can't hurt. And Dave Paulson, who's the mass turtle guy, certainly doesn't discourage me from getting it done. So, one, if you see turtles crossing the street, you pick them up, but not very high, and you take them in the direction they are going. And then you let me know so that we can get signs there. There's my turtle pitch.
Great. That's really good information. All right, we have less than a minute. Really quickly, Maury, Krista, how do you get in contact with you?
For HALT, the easiest way is to go to hopkintonlandtrust.org, and all the contact information is there.
Thank you. Krista?
Same for us. If you Google Sudbury Valley Trustees or go to svtweb.org. You'll find contact information for everybody on staff.
Great. Maury, Krista, Ed, thank you so much for being here. I hope we have you back soon.
Thank you
care.
so much, Jim.
Thank you. And I'll try to get my camera fixed.
Yes, I know. I missed your hair, Ed.
I know.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We're clear on TV.